Good afternoon. The Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Subcommittee on Education and the American Family will come to order. Thanks for being here. As you can tell, we're running a little late. It's a little hectic on the Hill today, but we will survive. This afternoon, we're having a hearing on empowering families for better educational results. Ranking Member Blunt Rochester and I will each have an opening statement. The witnesses will have 5 minutes for their opening statements, and senators will each have 5 minutes for questions. We will obviously have senators coming in and out because many votes today. So thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. It's always nice to see a fellow Alabamian here today, up here in the swamp. Thanks to Mr. Barnett for coming to visit today. We've called this hearing to discuss something very near and dear to my heart. One of the reasons I'm here, I was an educator for decades before I decided to come up here. And over those years, I saw the state of our education system decline. The federal government just kept spending more money in K through 12 education. And the more they spent, the worse the outcomes became. It was just amazing to me to watch it in real time. And it made no sense. It's the main reason I chose to run for this office. I didn't want to see our kids fail year after year. Then I got here and realized that we can fix it, but a lot of things are broken. 4 years I've been serving here on the Help Committee, and this year I finally got this gavel to make sure we could have something like this to where we could bring things to light. I wanted to focus on our kids' educational outcomes and figure out where we were failing and also where we're doing good things. That lends us to today. That's why we're having this hearing. We need to take a good hard look at our K through 12 education system and figure out what can we do to fix it, to make it better. Because the status quo in a lot of areas is not cutting it. That means we need to think outside the box. Since COVID, parents have gotten a lot more engaged, and that's where all the necessary change can start right at home, family. And since parents have started paying more attention, they've started calling for more and more options. Parents across our country are calling for their states to offer more options for their kids outside of failing school systems. States represented by folks on both sides of this dais are working on school choice options in their state legislatures. We'll hear about that issue from our witnesses today. Parents want these options, and we ought to listen to them. In my home state of Alabama, last year we passed the CHOOSE Act, which created an income tax credit for families who choose to enroll their children in private schools or homeschooling. Virginia, Florida, Alaska, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Indiana, and Washington are just a few states to name that have implemented or have pending state legislation to create these income tax credits promoting school choice. It's simple. When we give our parents and students choice, we yield better educational results. We owe our kids this investment. But it doesn't end there. Right now, our kids in a lot of areas can't read. We have kids entering middle school and high school who aren't at a third grade reading level. I used to recruit kids. I'd bring them in with 3.5 GPAs. The next thing I know, after testing them, they wouldn't be sixth grade reading level. Something has got to change with that. States and governors across our country have taken up the literacy challenge and enacted legislation at the state level where it should be. Ranking Member Blunt, Rochester's home state of Delaware, passed House Bill 304 that implemented reading assessments 3 times a school year for kids K through 3. And my state passed the Alabama Literacy Act, which does the same thing. And we're trying. No matter the state, this is a widespread effort, and we will discuss today the methods that are working. We'll talk about the science of reading and how best to implement it in our classrooms. We'll hear about how we can invest in our teachers and best prepare them to tackle this crisis head on. They need to be set up for success just as much as our students do. I want today to be an opportunity for this committee to have a conversation about what our states are doing and what can we do to support them from here, from the federal level. Our children are the best resource this country has, the best thing we've got going. And above all, we owe them one thing, an opportunity to succeed. And I look forward to working with all of you towards this common goal. Now I'll yield to my ranking member, Senator Blunt Rochester, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you especially to the witnesses that are before us. I want to start off by saying that we agree education is pivotal for our country, and putting children and putting families first is so important, which is why this subcommittee is so important. As the former Secretary of Labor in Delaware, I think about jobs, the economy, and how education relates to that. But also, as an American, I think about the history of public education in this country and why this is a tool for good citizens as well. We live in the wealthiest country on earth. No one in this country should be using decades old textbooks that are missing pages and wearing thin. No child should be hungry in class with no breakfast to fill them and no lunch to look forward to. And no teacher in America should be expected to wrangle 50 plus children at a time. We are the wealthiest nation in the world, yet tattered textbooks, hungry students, and overstretched educators are still a reality across our country. But instead of solving these problems with evidence based solutions, we know some creative things that are happening across this country. Some people just want to wash their hands of public schools entirely. Instead, they would prefer to subsidize private education at the expense of the 90% of American students and 95% of students with disabilities who attend public schools. Some call this school choice, but let's call it what it is. Private school vouchers are really the school's choice. Unlike public schools, private schools can select their student body based on the criteria they want. They can and do turn away students with disabilities. They can turn away LGBTQ students because of sexual orientation. They can turn away a Jewish student because of their faith. School choice should leave many families, sometimes it does, with no choice at all. And I want more students in Delaware. I want every student in America to have more. So, how do we fix these problems and get real results? The good news is that we actually know what works. We know that strategies like phonics and decoding help students learn to read. We know that small class sizes, skilled teachers, and individualized instruction promote better outcomes for students. And there are so many creative things on the horizon. As we know, the federal government plays a limited but important role in education. We cannot and we should not be making curriculum mandates from where we sit here in Washington, D.C. But we can invest in what works. We can uplift stories of success that show the true power of what public education can be. Like in Seaford, Delaware. That school district is important because this school district has a high poverty rate, and they've been able to help Delaware students improve their literacy and writing scores by training educators, implementing quality curriculum, and providing extra support to students in need. If we really want a better future for more and more options for our children, then we must truly invest in public schools. And we must also make good on our promise to educate students with disabilities and fully fund IDEA. And I would welcome the opportunity to collaborate with my Republican colleagues on doing just that. Unfortunately, the administration, as we all know, is illegally withholding over $5 billion in funds that would directly support teacher preparedness and student success. The president has proposed eliminating federal literacy grants and is trying to shut down the only department focused on improving education outcomes and protecting student civil rights. What our students need is stability and resources. And we must prioritize, not privatize, their futures. I would also say that I think we agree we want better for our kids. I think that is what is in common. The question isn't what do we need to do, it's if we're willing to do it. And I hope that my colleagues will consider working together And again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Coach, and I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Rochester. Now we'll have 5-minute opening statements from our witnesses. First, I'd like to introduce my constituent, Tyler Barnett from Birmingham, Alabama. Tyler is the founder and CEO of New Schools for Alabama, where he leads efforts to grow and support the charter school sector across our state. A former high school English teacher and experienced education policy leader, Tyler has held key roles at the Missouri and Illinois state education agencies and served as a strategist with the Walton Family Foundation. He is also a distinguished Pahara.
Pahara.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
that's good. You can read. I can't. That's good. A national leadership program that recognizes transformative leaders in education, and an active civic leader in Birmingham, where he lives with his wife and 2 daughters. I'm thrilled to have him here today, and I welcome him for his opening statement. Mr. Barnett.
Chairman Tuberville, Ranking Member Blunt Rochester, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to be here today to discuss school choice and literacy. I'm Tyler Barnett, CEO of New Schools for Alabama. We're a nonprofit organization based in Birmingham, Alabama, and our mission is to support the growth of excellent charter schools in Alabama to ensure that every child has access to a quality public education. As y'all likely know, charter schools have been a growing part of the national education landscape since 1991, when Minnesota enacted the country's first charter school law. Today, 46 states have charter schools, collectively serving nearly 4 million students from diverse backgrounds. And the largest national studies have shown that not only do charter schools deliver better outcomes, but their presence also improves outcomes for students in district schools. In 2015, results such as these inspired Alabama to become the 43rd state in the nation to adopt a charter school law. For years, Alabama has ranked at or near the bottom among states nationally in educational outcomes, and unfortunately, a student's zip code and socioeconomic status too often determine their academic success. In Alabama, students in our poorest communities often have no other choice but to attend a low-performing school unless they have the financial means to relocate or pay for private school tuition. But with the advent of our charter school law, many families in Alabama's lowest performing districts gained access to new, high-quality, tuition-free educational opportunities for their children. And parents are taking advantage of these new opportunities. Since the 2018 school year, Alabama has grown from 1 charter school serving 250 students to 17 charter schools serving over 8,000 students. Over 70% of charter school students in Alabama qualify for free or reduced lunch, and over 80% are students of color, both of which are much higher percentages than the state average. Encouragingly, this meteoric growth has produced not only more options, but also improved outcomes, most notably in literacy. In the state's most recent literacy results, all but 2 charter schools in Alabama outperformed their district peers, and 4 outperformed the state average. Moreover, every charter school in the state has made significant academic gains over the past 2 years. Last year, 3 of the top 25 most improved schools in the state were charter schools, even though charter schools represent only 17 of the roughly 1,500 public schools in Alabama. And perhaps most encouragingly, charter schools are delivering such results while operating at a grave disadvantage compared to their district peers. In Alabama, every charter school receives less funding than their comparison district, with an average funding gap of nearly $3,000 per kid. Notably, the primary catalyst for the dramatic increase in opportunities we're seeing in Alabama has been the federal charter schools program. In 2019, New Schools for Alabama was awarded a $25 million CSP state entities grant, which allowed us to make startup subgrants to support new charter schools in Alabama. Prior to receiving the CSP state entities grant, our charter movement was stagnant because of a shortage in startup capital. Since receiving the grant, what was once a nascent sector of just 1 charter school has become what it is today, one of the fastest growing charter school sectors in the country. While our current CSP state entities grant expires in September, we have applied for a new grant under the 2025 competition, and we're encouraged by the modifications that were made for this round. The demand for more and better options among Alabama families is loud and clear. Despite historic enrollment growth, over 2,000 families remain on wait lists to get into charter schools in Alabama. If we truly believe that it is in the best interests of our country to provide students with a quality public education, We must recognize that monopolizing public education to a single district serving thousands of kids is not always the most effective strategy. In closing, I'd like to state that charter schools represent just a part of a healthy educational ecosystem, and they alone are not a panacea to our educational woes. There are many factors that contribute to educational outcomes, but we cannot continue reserving the right of choice for only the affluent. Charter schools offer parents another tuition-free opportunity, and the data proves that they play an important role in educating America's children. With continued dialogue, I hope that we can work together to improve education for all kids. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this important matter.
Thank you very much. Our next witness is Ann Wicks. Ms. Wicks is the Don Evans Family Managing Director of Opportunity and Democracy at the Bush Institute, where she leads work on immigration, economic growth, education, and democratic governance. With a career spanning leadership roles at USC, Teach for America, and Stanford, she brings deep experience in education and policy. She also is a Pahara.
Oh, you got it. Yes, sir.
I'm getting better. Yeah. Fellow and active board member, and perhaps most importantly, a proud parent of a public school student. Ms. Wicks, we welcome your opening statement.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Tuberville, Ranking Member Blunt Rochester, and members, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this today. I'll focus my remarks on my experience as a parent advocate and then detail what the Bush Institute thinks strong state policy should include, and then what that means for the federal role. So there's three things that are happening right now. We've seen from the NAEP scores that came out earlier this year, we're on an alarming decline in reading scores. 30% of fourth graders, about 30% of eighth graders can read proficiently, which means millions of kids can't. We also know that instruction in many classrooms around this country don't reflect the evidence-based practices that we know works. And also, the world is changing really quickly. Many of us saw the White House executive order today about AI. That's just one example. We need kids who can read, think, and innovate in the grand American tradition of innovation. So 5 years ago, my son came home from kindergarten with a worksheet I recognized because of my work from a very problematic but very popular balanced literacy curriculum. That's the curriculum that doesn't teach reading the right way. I was alarmed. I called his principal to learn more, and she was very kind, but she defended the approach. And she said, Ann, most parents don't really even know what phonics is. So I ganged up with a bunch of moms who'd started to engage in this issue, and we spent about a year meeting with everyone we could to talk about the research, to talk about outcome data, and to talk about what we needed, including the fact that there were so many families reaching outside the district to get the support they needed. Our district finally changed, which was great, through the leadership of lots of folks on our school board. And I want to be clear, they were acting in good faith. They didn't think they were doing the wrong thing. They literally just didn't know what they didn't know. They wanted, like all teachers, for kids to succeed. I know that. But that investment our district made in people, money, and time to make this change paid off. We had a 15-point jump in a very short amount of time of third graders on grade level. This spring, we had 92% of our third graders reading on grade level. That number used to be in the 70s. We're a high-performing district, but that shows growth is possible everywhere. Not every district have parents who can advocate as we did. So that's why we need state policy that can really help put the guardrails in to protect all kids and make sure they have access to the right reading policy. We think that includes 5 things for states who are thinking about it. 1, teach your aspiring teachers correctly how to teach the science of reading. Only about 25% of educator prep programs do that right now. The second, we have lots of sitting teachers who never were exposed to this in their own training who really want to learn it. We need to do professional development and coaching for them. We need to ensure that schools have access to high quality instructional materials that are aligned to this. We need to do what we call screen and intervene. So we're using the right screeners early to identify kids who may have issues like dyslexia or English language learners so we can support them. And then, of course, we need to measure and monitor. We have to know with transparent, comparable, valid, reliable outcome data what's happening for kids and use that data. It's not enough to just pass the policy. So what does that mean then for the federal government, which should have a much more limited role? There's 2 things that we'd like to see stay in place. Number 1, the federal requirement for every state to have a summative assessment and an accountability system. That transparency is what we think the best way to combat what President George W. Bush called, I think very memorably, the soft bigotry of low expectations. That still exists, and transparency is one of our best tools to make sure that all kids are seen and served in our system. The second thing is we want to see the federal government funding important research. One of the reasons we know about the science of reading is because of federal investments in research, including the very influential National Reading Panel report in 2000. And I'd also like to thank the Secretary McMahon announced that evidence-based literacy would be part of one of her priorities for the competitive grants. We think that's a great investment in state leadership. So I'll say in conclusion, American parents want schools that meet the high expectations and hopes that they have for their own kids, right? They want teachers who have access to research-based practical solutions, and they want to know their children are on track. And I think the right kinds of policy can help deliver on that. So Mr. Chairman, members, thank you again for the opportunity to talk about this, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Wicks. Our next witness will be introduced by Senator Moody from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am excited to introduce our next witness, Jenny Gentles. Jenny is the Director of Education, Freedom, and Parental Rights at the Defense of Freedom Institute for Policy Studies. She also hosts the Freedom to Learn podcast, which focuses on parental rights and educational freedom. What I believe is an important and really laid the groundwork for the success that our state has had and being America's leader in school choice and parental rights. In fact, Florida has just been announced as for the fourth year running, the #1 state for parent power on index, and the #1 state for educational freedom, and the #2 state, although we're coming off a #1 rating for education overall by the U.S. News and World Report. So you can really see if you start laying the groundwork for real parental choice and involvement and choice in education, making sure kids are not bound by their zip codes, but that each kid has an opportunity to excel based on their needs. You can see how a state and what they're trying to accomplish with their children can really excel and succeed. And a lot of that is due to Ms. Gentles. So I was very excited to be here today as the newest senator to introduce Ms. Gentles. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Moody. And I think a lot of it is credit to the governors of Florida, from Governor Jeb Bush to current Governor Ron DeSantis. That leadership at the state level really matters when getting policy right. Chairman Tuberville, Senator, Ranking Member Blunt Rochester, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. And I applaud the HELP Committee's focus on how our nation can better achieve educational results. As you know, our K-12 education system is in crisis with abysmal academic outcomes. America ranked 22nd for 4th grade math and 20th for 8th grade math, according to the latest TEMS results, with widening gaps between scores for top and bottom performing students. We ranked 26th in math in the most recent PISA results, with our lowest score ever recorded. Our international rankings are embarrassing, and our nation's report card, or NAEP scores, are heartbreaking. Despite spending nearly $19,000 per pupil and $190 billion in supplemental COVID-era funds, 70% of students aren't proficient in reading or math. 40% of 8th graders lack basic math skills, which means that they can't find the midpoint on a number line. 40% of 4th graders can't grasp basic reading concepts, like recognizing the main idea in a story. One major driver of academic freefall isn't talked about enough, and that's the pernicious influence of school unions. The National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers operate more like political machines than education advocates. They prioritize power over student success. They block the student-centered priorities that we're talking about here today, and they push an extreme cultural agenda while funneling taxpayer dollars into campaign coffers of political candidates who will do union leaders' bidding. State and local union leaders face little accountability, even though they have exacerbated the nation's academic crisis by closing schools with strikes across the country, eliminating after-school tutoring programs in Ohio, opposing science of reading training in Indiana, defending 3Qing in Minnesota, skipping school in California, and demanding a shorter school year in New Mexico. Union leaders' power has remained unchecked for far too long. Fortunately, states with strong leaders who aren't afraid to stand up to the unions and fight for students are embracing real solutions like expanding education freedom and robust literacy initiatives. And the federal government should support them by reducing federal burdens and holding unions accountable. Just this year, Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina, Indiana, Idaho, New Hampshire, and Wyoming created or significantly expanded existing school choice programs. 35 states now offer some type of education freedom option, 16 of them with universal eligibility, and close to 20 states offer parents education savings accounts, or ESAs. Enrollment in these programs has doubled from 2020 to 2025. And public school options, as we heard, are expanding as well, with 27 states allowing charter schools and 16 states offering strong cross-district open enrollment opportunities. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act established a dollar-for-dollar tax credit for individual contributions of up to $1,700 to scholarship granting organizations. This is a significant step in the right direction and could open up educational opportunities for millions of students. As you know, school choice enables families to choose the educational path that meets their child's individual needs, regardless of their zip code or income. It's a popular idea. 81% of voters in a January poll agreed that the U.S. should empower parents and prioritize individual students' needs by providing greater access and more choices. 74% of public school teachers polled in March support education savings accounts. Choice improves parental satisfaction as families find safe options that align with their values. And studies show that beneficiaries of education freedom reach higher levels of educational attainment and are more civically engaged. Public school students benefit in a competitive landscape that drives innovation and improved academic outcomes. The state-driven initiatives we're highlighting today don't rely on the U.S. Department of Education. President Trump and Education Secretary Linda McMahon are pursuing the right path as they reduce the department's dominant role, move power over education back to states, communities, and families, and work with Congress to disperse the department's programs and core funding to other federal agencies. As Tennessee Education Commissioner Lizette Reynolds recently told me, I'm excited about the opportunities that can be afforded to us through really giving and devolving education back to the states. The state of American K-12 education should be considered a national emergency. In too many places, our union-controlled and broken K-12 system is robbing children of the future they deserve. Resources and power must be returned to families and those closest to students, equipping them to make the best decisions for children, holding unions accountable, reducing federal burdens, and supplementing state education freedom programs with the federal scholarship tax credit are important steps forward. Thank you.
And it is my honor to introduce our witness, Mr. Barrera. Richard Barrera is the Board of Education Vice President for the San Diego Unified School District, where he served since he was first elected in 2008. Throughout his time on the board, students in his district have achieved record high graduation and college eligibility rates, record low dropout suspension rates, record low expulsion rates. And today they are ranked at or near the top of large California districts in reading, math, science, social studies proficiency. He holds a bachelor's degree in history from UCSD and a master's degree in public policy from Harvard University. We are happy to have you here, and we are ready for your testimony, Mr. Barrera.
Thank you so much, Senator Blunt Rochester and Senator Tuberville and members of the committee. I am honored to be in my 17th year representing one of the largest public school districts in the country. The portion of the city of San Diego that I represent is made up of diverse, hardworking families, many of whom are immigrants to this country. Our district, about 60% of the students in our district are socioeconomically disadvantaged. About 16% are English learners. About 18% are students with disabilities. Our district offers a compelling example for this committee in looking at this question of how do we improve literacy outcomes for students and whether we choose to invest in our neighborhood public schools or whether we choose to divert taxpayer money to private schools. In the most recent NAEP results, the nation's report card, San Diego Unified among the large urban districts that participated in the trial urban districts assessment. We rank number 1 in 4th grade literacy and number 1 in 8th grade literacy. And this follows a consistent pattern over a decade of growth and achievement that's been recognized by the Learning Policy Institute, the UCLA Center for School Transformation, the Council of Great City Schools. We got there with a conscious choice of investing directly in our neighborhood schools. We prioritize resource allocations so that the schools that need to support their students the most have access to the best professional development based on research-based strategies, have access to data, have the ability to participate in professional learning communities, and have lower class sizes and better nursing and counseling ratios, better ratios for students with disabilities. We have invested directly in our classroom educators. Coming out of the recession, our base salaries have increased by nearly 40% in our district. A teacher who started their career 20 years ago making less than $40,000 in one of the most expensive cities in the country is now making nearly $130,000 a year. And we have fully paid family health benefits for all of our educators. And our local taxpayers have invested time and again, 4 times since I've been on the board, in local facilities bond measures that total $11.5 billion. And the state-of-the-art facilities that creates sends a message to our students that we care about you and we believe in you. We set high expectations for our students. We made the graduation requirement for all of our students the course sequence that's necessary for admission to the University of California. When we did that, people said, oh, your students can't measure up. Your graduation rates are going to tank. Our graduation rate is about to be more than 90%, and our college eligibility rates have gone up by 50% for all students and have nearly tripled for Latino and Black students in our district. What can the federal government do to support the growth of literacy in students across this country? There are a couple of very concrete things that you can do right now. One, you can continue the bipartisan advocacy efforts to demand that President Trump releases $5.4 billion of illegally impounded funds in a budget that you have already passed. And these are the funds specifically to invest in the development of capacity of teachers to teach literacy and in the development of the capacity of teachers to support English learners. That's exactly the kind of money that's held up in that funds. Number 2, you can fully fund IDA, as Senator Blunt Rochester talked about. The $58 billion that you're about to siphon off in this private school voucher scheme is 4 times the amount that you're currently spending on special education. You have a responsibility, and you've had it for 50 years, to fund 40% of the cost of special education in this country. Right now, you fund about 10%, less than 7% in our district. Fully fund IDA. And the last thing that I would say is you can ask, in fact, demand that the President of the United States stops terrorizing families in our district who are frankly afraid of sending their students to school. A second grader who's trying to read in their classroom shouldn't have to worry about whether their best friend is going to be at school the next day or whether they're going to see their parent when they get home. You can do these significant things that can really make a difference in improving literacy. Much better strategy than siphoning off money for private school tax credits to families who are already going to private school, don't need it. And by the way, $1,700 in our city, private school tuition is $20,000 to $50,000 a year. So somebody who gets a $1,700 tax credit is not going to make a difference at all. What it does is just simply subsidizes families who are already going to private school. There's a lot that you can do, and it's time that you do it.
Thank you. We'll start questions now. We'll start with Senator Husted from the great state of Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great to join you and the ranking member today. Appreciate all of you being here. It's something I'm going to channel my best Bernie Sanders if I could today. He often asks, as the ranking member of the full committee, about whether health care is right. I'm going to ask each of you, yes or no question. Do parents have the right to choose where their child goes to school? Start right here.
Do they or should they?
Do parents have the right to choose where their children attend school?
I would argue that they should, but not all do.
Okay.
I would echo my colleague to my right that they should, but not all currently do have that option.
Yes, parents do have that right, and we need to implement policies that ensure that they should. And fortunately, we have 35 states doing that with private school choice and 47 with charter schools, so we're on the right track.
In our district, they already do. We have a robust choice system of community schools, magnet schools, neighborhood schools, charter schools. Parents have full choice.
Can they choose
already.
anywhere they want to go?
Of course they can.
Private school?
And we have private schools that parents can choose to go to.
So you get my point. And this is, I know we're still, I can't believe we're still having this conversation as a nation because, first of all, I want to thank all educators, whether you're in a public school, a private school, a charter school, a career tech school, a magnet, whatever it is. It's a hard job, and it's a really, really, really important job. And you know, it's just an amazing thing. Since I've been here, I have a appreciation for the fact that it seems like we always want to pass laws to tell people what to do with their lives. But we never really want to trust to give them the freedom to do the things that they think is best. They think are best for them or for their children. I come from Ohio. It was home of the Zellman case, 2002. Settled the score right there. Supreme Court. Parents have the right to choose. Voucher systems, scholarship systems are allowed in this country. And when I was Speaker of the House in Ohio, I created the Ed Choice Scholarship Program. 4,000 students attend school of their choice. Now in Ohio, that's over 100,000 parents who've decided that's a good idea for them and for their children. And I just think it's so important that we do that. I'll quickly ask, Miss
Gentles?
Gentles. Okay, tell me, what do you think about what we did in the Big Beautiful Bill in terms of giving the ability to fund scholarships through the program? Does that help?
It's going to help. It's not going to be implemented until January 2027. Want to make sure we know it's not an education program. It does not take dollars from education. It is a program that will be administered by the Department of Treasury, and there'll be rulemaking that will be putting this program in place. And
if
it's
people
not a
who want to
voucher.
donate to it, right?
Yeah,
it's
not a voucher for $1,700. It's an opportunity for taxpayers to take the dollars that they would have given to Uncle Sam and send it to a scholarship granting organization that can create scholarships of whatever amount for students who might need support in order to attend schools of their choice.
So I've been in the last 25 years to hundreds of schools, public schools, private schools, charter schools. And I'm serious. I think that what the people that work in all those schools as teachers and educators, God bless them, they're fantastic. But one thing I've learned about kids is that not all of them learn the same. Not all have the same passions. Not all of them come from the same background. So schools have a very difficult choice being a one-size-fits-all. And the more that we can do to help provide a menu of options for those families and those children, the better off they'll be, because not everybody wants to go to college. There's career tech education. There are all kinds of things. But the one thing that we just will finish with this question for anybody who wants to take it. Coach talked about this. The science of reading is a proven method for improving literacy and reading. And we've had many, many places around this country that said, no, we're going to do it a different way. Now that's being exposed. Any of you who have an expertise in that want to share a thought about how that is the best way to do literacy and reading?
I'm happy to take that, Senator. Thank you for that question. We have benefited from decades of research about how children learn to read. That's what rolled up is called the science of reading. Sometimes you hear people give that a shorthand of phonics, but there's actually 5 elements to that. Phonemic awareness was like if you're a child who matches a letter with a sound, you learn that. Phonics, you're putting those together to learn how to sound out a word. Fluency, you're starting to get better at reading. Vocabulary, you learn more words. And then comprehension is sort of the holy grail, right? Where you can read a book or an article and think about it, ask questions, understand a main idea. That's generally the science of reading. It should not be controversial to teach what research has told us. There have been some problematic curriculum not based on research that have become very popular around the country. That was what was in my son's school. And I think we have to, state policy can really lead here to make sure that teachers understand the right way to teach. What is the evidence base? Why should I teach this way? Why does it make a difference for kids? And then have the instructional materials, the coaching, the support to make sure it's implemented. And then quite frankly, to measure the outcomes. We always have to be measuring the outcomes to know what's really happening for kids. Sometimes we get distracted by inputs that focus on adults, but at the end of the day, we're all here because we want children to be successful. So the evidence base is very clear about the right way to teach.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again to the witnesses. And Mr. Barrera, I want to follow up a little bit on your discussion about the diversion of taxpayer dollars, funds that were legally put forward by the members of Congress, and the thought of, because you got two tracks. One is the dollars that were approved and appropriated and are being clawed back. And then there is the desire to shift funding. I'm a big believer in efficiency. I'm a big believer in outcomes. I want us to make sure that our kids are getting the best education possible, but I too am concerned. And so first, I want to follow up on your comments about IDEA. You noted that our failure to fully fund it can be a barrier to our students reaching their full potential. How would fully funding IDEA enable districts to better support students with disabilities? I mean, we're shifting money potentially that could be going to fully funding IDEA.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Senator Blunt Rochester. And again, the $58 billion going into this tax credit private school scheme is 4 times the amount that the federal government is currently spending on special education. Were the federal government to meet its responsibility and fund 40% of the costs of special education, it would take an enormous burden off of our district and districts and around the country, states around the country that are picking up the tab. So we estimate in San Diego Unified that the federal government meeting its responsibility would result in over $50 million that we're right now spending out of our general fund. That were that money available to us, here's what we could do. We could hire 3 to 4 full-time literacy teachers in every single one of our high-needs schools who could be working side by side with classroom teachers, building their capacity to implement evidence-based literacy strategies. We could be hiring 5 to 10 paraeducators, special education aides that are with the students all during the day. So these are investments that, of course, would help students with disabilities, but would help every student in the school were the federal government to meet its responsibility.
And do you think block granting IDEA, as the administration has proposed, would improve outcomes? And how would your district respond if that happened?
Well, our district would respond in the way that we have always, which is to prioritize all of our students, including students with disabilities. The concern, of course, is that if IDEA or the funding for special education, paltry as it is, that's coming from the federal government, were block granted to states, what is the guarantee that those states are going to actually meet the needs of students with disabilities? It would be a really easy thing to do for a state or a school district to say, you know, it's too hard to educate with students with disabilities, so we're going to use that money for something else. So if you don't ensure that that money is actually there to benefit students with disabilities, I think we're very likely to see a crisis in special education in the country.
Earlier this month, former high-level officials from the Department of Education's Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services and the Office of Special Education Programs sent a letter to the Appropriations Committee urging Congress not to block grant IDEA, close the department, or transfer the department's responsibilities to the Department of Health and Human Services. This letter is a bipartisan plea to Congress and has been co-signed by officials from the administrations of President Biden, Trump, Obama, George W. Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, Ronald Reagan, Carter, Nixon, and Ford. Chair Tuberville, I ask unanimous consent that this letter be entered into the record.
So be it.
I asked my colleagues also to consider this and to consider your comments as we move forward with FY 2026 appropriations bills. I have more questions for the record that I will submit to you, but I end my remarks as a parent whose children graduated from Delaware Public Schools. We've done many things in our state. We have many different options. We have public school choice, we have charters, and I'm proud of the education they received, and I want more because I also have a granddaughter, my first grandchild, and I want our education system in this country to be the best. And so I hope that we can come together on this and not shift resources to places that don't need it when we have a lot of places in this country that do need the support. Thank you, and I yield back.
Senator King.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville, and thanks to the witnesses. Just to follow up a little bit on the IDEA issue, because this is one that troubles me too, separate and apart from the discussion about the scholarship program. I've always been troubled by this underfunding as a former mayor and governor. It's kind of interesting. The IDEA, revolutionary law, unlike many educational laws, I've never heard somebody say we should undo the IDEA. They complain about the paperwork and they complain about the underfunding, but I think everybody realizes the notion that a child with a disability should get an individualized plan so they can be all they can be. What a great idea. It's one of the best civil rights laws we have. But the underfunding is a huge problem. So when I was mayor of Richmond, school boards in Virginia do not have their own taxing authority. So they come hat in hand to their board of supervisors or city council together with state funds and federal funds. And so the biggest part of the city of Richmond's budget every year is the allocation that we make to our school system, about 25,000 students. But if the federal government was fully funding IDEA, Richmond might decide, wow, we're spending, just like you, Mr. Barrett, talked about what you have to spend, that you could spend it on teacher salaries. You could spend it on additional hiring. You could spend it on physical improvements. San Diego would spend that extra different than Richmond, and that's fine. It would, localities with full federal participation could do more. And so that's why I have worked with Senator Collins over the years to try to find strategies to get us, not immediately, but to get us to what that 40% deal originally was. And we'd really help out a lot of schools if we did. The proposals that in the reconciliation bill with respect to tax credit for scholarships. Now, contributions to private schools are already tax deductible because they're 501c3. So there's already a tax deduction if you make it. But this is in addition to a tax deduction, to a tax credit. Is there any restriction about whether the schools that can utilize those tax credits have to follow the IDEA?
Absolutely not, Senator. And the issue when we subsidize private entities is that there is in fact no accountability. You know, we're talking about the system of accountability and assessment. How do we know that private schools, first of all, are going to admit, you know, a fair number of students with disabilities?
And just so I'm going to let everybody else respond to Mr. Barrett, because this is an important point.
How do we know that that private schools are going to in fact employ evidence-based strategies to support students with disabilities and all students? How do we know that private schools are going to even participate in the Smarter Balance assessments or in the NAEP or any of that?
Just to the other witnesses on this point, does the reconciliation bill require that private schools that might avail themselves of this credit follow the IDA? Does it excuse them from following the IDA, or is it TBD based on regulations that the Treasury Department comes up with?
Well, IDA has been around for 50 years, and throughout that whole history, private school students have benefited from equitable services funding through IDEA. This is not new for private schools. It's not new for students with disabilities to attend private schools. My daughters would be an example of that. And when we talk about school choice programs, we have hundreds of thousands of students with disabilities benefiting from state school choice programs. So these are families who have chosen to say, this whole IEP and IDEA, that regime was not working for my child. I need to go find another option. And they take advantage of those school choice options.
But are the schools required to follow the IDEA?
That's not in the provision for the
It's
tax credit.
Not current law, and not in the provision in the reconciliation.
No, and like I said, for the 50-year history of IDEA, there has been a relationship between students with special needs and private schools, and that's not been a requirement.
Is Ms. Gentle's point? Do you guys generally agree with that?
Yeah, I think I have not heard anyone disagreeing with the premise or the idea or the promise of IDEA. I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that and the importance of doing that. One of the reasons we care so much.
But parents cannot, say sort of challenge a school like they can in the public school setting. Hey, wait a minute, you're not really doing the right thing by my kid's particular disability, right? With private schools, that's not a possibility.
A plan. Private school families, they still have a plan, a private services plan. There's still a process in place.
But is it enforceable in the way that it is against public schools?
I think plenty of parents of students with disabilities would tell you that the IDEA process is incredibly broken. It's not enforced, and they have to hire very expensive lawyers to sue in order to get their FAPE rights, in order to get services and accommodations. This takes the lawyer out.
Can I just say it's true that some aren't happy with it? It's also true that massive numbers of students, about 15% of the kids in the Virginia public school systems, are on IEPs. One of my kids was.
I'm familiar.
Most kids on IEPs end up working out of the IEP because the services that are provided under the IDEA through an IEP enable a student who has a special need to sort of get the extra that they need, and then they're mainstreamed with no IEP because there's been success. There are people who aren't happy with it who sue the Henrico School Board. I get that. But I think overwhelmingly for the 15% of kids in our public school systems that are on IEPs, they're availing themselves of a whole lot more than they used to be able to before the IDA was passed. Last thing I'll just say, and then I'm going to hand it back to you, Mr. Chair. I want to applaud the chairman who has now walked in, Senator Cassidy, and some of my Republican colleagues for joining with us when we complained at the Secretary of Education pausing these Title IV funds that were being used for literacy, before school programs, after school programs, summer school programs, so kids wouldn't fall back. $23 million with help from Virginia, tens of millions from other states. When we put this on the table last week, a lot of Republicans joined in, leaned in pretty hard with Secretary McMahon, while she is still pausing other funds, English language learners, which are about literacy, student mental health, which can advance literacy, at least on the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. Those dollars have been released with a bipartisan effort, and I thank Secretary McMahon for that, and I thank my colleagues for helping out.
Thank you, Senator King. Mr. Barnett, we've had tremendous growth in the number of students across America enrolling in charter schools, over 4 million students to be exact. How does that success of charter schools impact our district public school system?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there are really two large national studies that speak to this. One comes out of the Progressive Policy Institute and another comes out of the Fordham Institute. Both actually show that the presence of charter schools has in some way improved outcomes within district schools. There's a certain threshold that the Progressive Policy Institute's study showed somewhere around 30%. So the presence of charter schools that give up to 30% of students in a given market the opportunity to enroll has positive net impact on not only charter school performance, but also district performance.
Yeah. Why are we seeing literacy stats rise in charter schools versus public schools? Why is that happening?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, Senator?
Why is the literacy rate rising? In other words, we're having better scores in charter schools and not as well in public schools.
Well, I can really only speak to the results in Alabama. Alabama has adopted the science of reading by law as mandatory. Every charter school participates in what we call letters training, which is essentially teaching teachers how to implement the science of reading. And that's through the Alabama Reading Initiative. And so statewide in Alabama, reading scores are improving, and the latest NAEP scores show that. They are also improving among charter schools, and our charter schools are improving at a faster rate currently in the state of Alabama writ large. What I would say is we do have a number of districts where, at least within specific schools, we are not seeing those trends. And I'll use Birmingham City Schools as an example. Birmingham City Schools, 43 schools in the district. There are still 2 schools in that district where 1% or fewer of kids are proficient in reading outcomes. There are a number of schools in the district, 7 schools, I believe, where 0 to 1% of kids are proficient in reading or math, and there are 13 schools where less than 5% are proficient in either subject. So it's still a problem, but I think it's kind of localized a little bit more in Alabama.
Ms. Wicks, you talked about teacher preparedness and professional development in your testimony. How important is preparing our educators to teach the science of reading method?
Senator, thank you for that important question. It's critical that we give educators the right preparedness to understand this issue and be able to deploy it in their classrooms. I referenced in my opening remarks that only 25% of educator prep programs are currently teaching the science of reading to their aspiring teachers. And even worse, about 40% of them are teaching the wrong stuff. So they're teaching these brand new teachers the wrong way to teach reading. If they're interested in more, the National Council on Teacher Quality put out that report. They're the best at studying teacher prep programs. And I think this comes down to a matter of state leadership and accreditation. They make some recommendations about the importance of setting state standards for what these programs need to be teaching. Have some way to measure that if it's through accreditation or others, and then to tie the state licensure exams to those standards to ensure that those candidates have actually learned this and can do it in their classroom. And you see the same thing for sitting teachers who maybe never got this in their training and need that professional development.
Thank you. Ms. Gentles, on both sides there's an argument whether President Trump and the Department of Education is undermining public school. And because of the work done to expand school choice, do you think there's a truth to that argument?
Consistently, studies show that when states have implemented school choice programs, the nearby public schools have benefited. So increasing competition inspires innovation, and a rising tide lifts all boats. So we were pleased to see the executive order from the president supporting expanding school choice, educational freedom. And we're also pleased to see the executive order ordering the Secretary of Education to look into dismantling the Department of Education within federal law, and with the understanding that the Secretary will be working with Congress on that, because we do think that freeing up federal regulations, freeing up states from federal regulations, from monitoring, from compliance, all the time that all those bureaucrats at the state and district level are spending on federal paperwork is going to benefit public education. It's going to benefit public school students. It's going to benefit public school educators.
Do you think we should give more power back to the states when it's education?
Absolutely. We need to give power to the states. I think we've heard such great news today on what strong state leaders, sensible state leaders implementing common sense policies are doing. It's very encouraging to see what's happening. We didn't mention Louisiana, but Louisiana is a bright spot amidst the 2024 NAEP scores, the only state where fourth grade reading scores exceeded pre-COVID results.
More so than Alabama?
Alabama's pretty awesome too. It's been referred to as the Southern Surge. There's really good news coming out of the states, and encouraging that, fostering that is absolutely the right direction. Education policies set at the state level, and let's foster that, and let's get the federal government out of the way.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to Chairman Cassidy, and he'll finish this up while I go vote.
Hey, thank you, and thanks for a great hearing. I know it was well attended, so thank you, Senator Tuberville. Really appreciate it. And gentlemen from Alabama, all of you, thank you all for being here. We speak a lot about science of reading. Full disclosure, my wife is the CEO of a set of 4 public charter schools for children with dyslexia. And she'll get referrals from other schools because, well, 20% of us, 20% of everybody watching in this room are dyslexic, according to the folks at Yale. And and those who are recognized, have interventions, sometimes they're just smart enough to get by, or they're mildly dyslexic, they do okay. But someone who's severely dyslexic or without resources oftentimes does poorly. Again, my wife went into one of our maximum security prisons, and she found that 50% of the men were dyslexic. And that is compatible with literature. I think it was, she may tell me 70%. But it was the same as found in a prison in Texas. So we know that illiteracy is a major risk factor for incarceration, and that dyslexia is a kind of principal reason for people to be illiterate. So as you speak of the need to train for the science of reading, there is particular screening required and curriculum developed for those children who are dyslexic. So Ms. Wicks, any comment on that? And how do we broaden the number of kids being screened, and once we discover them, do something with them?
Senator, thank you for that question. And it's such an important issue. And I'm glad you referenced that stat about folks who are imprisoned. It's truly one of the best ways to disenfranchise people is to ensure they can't read. I mean, it's so much is foreclosed to you if you're not able to read, to make yourself understood, understand others. There is one of the recommendations that we make for state policy is to identify, we call it screen and intervene. So the right evidence-based screeners that you get early can flag the children that may have reading issues like dyslexia or others, because then you know very quickly which tools to use to help them get back on track. We have so much now that we know. Your wife, I'm sure, knows this very, very well. So many tools that are available if we're screening correctly and using the
We
right.
have a sense of how many school districts or how many states around the nation have mandatory screening for reading issues in pre-K, K, or 1?
I could get back to your staff on that. I know we've got about 40 states who have some science of reading law of various forms and various.
But that's different from screening to see if somebody's at risk. Because really, whatever we have on the whiteboard doesn't matter unless you're detecting the children. I think we'd all agree, what is the old axiom? You learn to read by grade 3, and after that you read to learn. Most kids are only determined to have a problem reading by grade 3.
Yes, sir.
So we've lost that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Mr. Barrera, I'm very impressed with the stats coming out of San Diego that you lead. Do y'all universally screen for dyslexia or other reading disorders, and if so, at what age?
Yes. In fact, California has a universal screening policy now that requires all districts to do universal screening. I think it's TKK, so it starts at the youngest grades. I think it goes to second grade. And we've got an established group of universal screening providers that also do formative assessment and analysis around evidence-based literacy practice.
And then within the school system, do y'all have a program specifically, a curriculum specifically for the dyslexic student? Or are they mainstreamed with the others, kind of the same sort of curriculum everybody else is?
Well, I think there's curriculum, Senator, as you know, but then there's also practice. And so if we have the tools, the screening tools in place, which we do, that allows classroom teachers, and if classroom teachers have access to the data and an ability to do that analysis, particularly around formative assessments, that allows teachers to target strategies to...
Now, let me ask you, though, I think either Ms. Wicks or Ms. Gentles, or one of you, maybe any one of you, talked about the need for teachers to have ongoing education as regards both the prospective teacher, the actual teacher, on.
Yes. And
teaching a dyslexic is different than teaching a non-dyslexic, if you will.
Yeah. Again, what we would point to as the most important professional development strategy for teachers, there's what happens in a school of education. There's sort of pull out PDs where, teachers leave their classroom and go to some. It's having an experienced literacy resource teacher who can be there side by side with the classroom teacher and identify this particular
I
student.
find that the literacy teacher, unless she is taught specifically about dyslexia,
Yeah.
because oftentimes dyslexia is not, I think, given the sufficient emphasis. Put it this way. We got 20% of the population is dyslexia.
Yes.
We got national reading scores that have not improved for decades. 40% of kids of color are reading below basic by what, grade 4? We are failing. Now, something's wrong. So in my mind, it makes sense that we have a bunch of kids poorly diagnosed and or intervened upon with dyslexia, anchoring that so that whatever we do for the others, we are anchored by kids failing to reach their potential because the intervention is not correct. Now, so I say that, and I'm not fussing at anybody. I'm just kind of a cry of the heart to do something. In your school system, and I can imagine your demographic, because I'm a little bit familiar with your neighborhood. What percent of the kids are reading? Do you have that same sort of dismal 40%? I'm not blaming you. I'm asking that 40% reading below basic by grade 3.
It depends, obviously on the part of the district. Obviously, it depends where students are when they come into the system. So if we have students that are already 3 years behind by the time they enter kindergarten or TK, then it takes longer to catch those students up. So if you look at the data that we're anticipating for this recently concluded year, the 24-25 year, we're expecting record growth on our summative assessments, particularly driven by Latino students who are
Record growth in terms of student population, or in terms of growth of your score rates?
No, sorry, growth of literacy achievement scores for those particular students.
And I also want to just put something out there, because I came in late and I have incredible respect for Senator Kane, worked very well with him. But I think I heard him wondering whether or not charter schools cherry pick or others cherry pick. My wife is the CEO of public charter schools for children with dyslexia. She gets referrals from private parochial and public schools for children who cannot read. You're concentrating people, and when you give them a word-intensive test, you're actually focusing upon their weakness, not upon their strength. And so there can be a converse thing, and I'm sure you'd agree, Mr. Barnett, that you can actually, if you do, as my wife does, specifically reach out to a group which is more academically challenged. Everybody else is referring because they don't want these kids pulling down their median score. So they refer to my wife, and they do a great job. Their scores rise, but you've got something which is concentrated upon addressing a weakness, and that weakness is particularly for a test such as schools are graded by. I'm making a pitch here, and as chair of the committee, you can imagine I'm going to try and do something about it, that a better way to evaluate children would be against themselves year over year, as opposed to a mean of a school against every other school. And that's kind of the mirror image of what Mr. Barnett, the criticism charters get. Oh, you're cherry picking, so your scores are better. No, you can have a score which concentrates those who have the greatest need. You're cherry picking, but you're cherry picking for a sense of mission, not in order to gain your score. So, but I'm a big believer in charters, and I thank you for them. I thank you all for being here. Thank you all for caring about education. Thank you all for traveling to DC. With that, do I have a... For any senator wishing to ask additional questions for the record will be due 5 p.m. Wednesday, August 6th. Thank you again for the witnesses for being here. Subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you all.